We're here with Jack Bruce and we're here to do a very special fan-led interview where the fans have been submitting their questions online. And if it's okay with you, we'll just get going.
Just carry on, right ahead.
So firstly, we have Claudine Perdue, and she asks, Mr. Bruce, what was your main decision in the early days of your career in choosing the Gibson EB3 over other basses? Was it the short scale or the resonance?
It was more the short scale, plus the fact that I could put light labella strings on there so that I could bend the strings like a guitar, because I wanted it very much to be a bass guitar, not just a bass. So that was my reasoning behind that. The Gibson, and also the sound is different. At the time, there was only really Fenders, not a lot of different kind of basses. And I didn't really like the sound of those, but I really liked the sound of Gibson, more like a guitar.
Okay. So then we've got Stephen Senecki, who wants to know what prompted you to pick up such a prominent style of lead bass playing?
Well, I wouldn't really agree that it's lead bass playing. That's just a handle that people have put on it. I think it was just at the time in Cream, because we're talking about Cream, really. That was the exciting part of it. It was just improvised music. And I thought it was really good that we could all play melodically, almost like counterpoint. So even Ginger on the drums was playing melodic drums.
So Clifford Allen would like to know, can you talk a bit about the cross-pollination of British jazz and rock blues of the late 60s in terms of songwriting structure?
That's just not something I've ever considered. First of all, I never considered myself a British jazz player or a British rock player or anything, but just a player. As far as songwriting and British jazz, I don't know. So I really don't think there's a lot of connection there, certainly not in my mind.
Do you feel that there was influences going, back and forward?
I think the important people from the jazz side were especially people like Miles Davis and, of course, Tony Williams, who were very much picking up on bands like Cream, Jimi Hendrix. In other words, improvising bands and applying that to the writing of jazz music and the playing and improvising of jazz music.
Okay.
I don't really see it the other way around, the jazz players playing rock very much, but the other way around it happened.
So Steve Edwards would like to know, what are your memories of playing and touring with Alexis Korner, and how important was he as a mentor to your development as a musician?
Well, the band itself was very important to me, because I was introduced to the what we called rhythm and blues in those days, and it gave me a great love of the blues, more like country blues, really. As far as the touring side of it, I just remember being terrified by Alexis's driving, because he would drive really fast no matter what the conditions. If it was foggy, he wouldn't slow down. I remember once we were driving along at 60 or something along this little road, and then he suddenly just turned off the road and went into this hospital, drove around the hospital at 60, and then just drove onto the road and kept on going as if nothing had happened. And nobody said a word. We all just sat there going, gulp. So yeah, no, he was a great influence on not just me, but on a lot of people, because he and Cyril Davis, because you can't forget about Cyril Davis, they started that movement really of listening to and playing country blues. So he was very, very important, and also somebody who doesn't get the recognition. They always say John Mayall. But John Mayall, good as he was at having good lead guitar players, was not as influential in my opinion. He was the next generation anyway. Alexis was the big daddy.
Now we've got a question from Paul Showerman. Do you miss the old club days in Soho, or do you look back and think, God, what an awful place?
Oh no, I used to love playing. We used to do, me and Ginger, we were like the rhythm section at the time, and we would do the Flamingo Club, the all-nighters, and I certainly had a great time. It's a great learning experience as well, playing with Johnny Parker on piano. He was the guy who played piano on Humphrey Littleton's Bad Penny Blues, that great piano, that great boogie-woogie piano. And it was just a fabulous time to be young. I was very young, 18 or something, and it was wonderful. Never had much money, but that didn't seem to matter at the time.
Danny Brubaker would like to know, hello Jack, my question, what are the two most different things between touring in the 60s and touring today?
Touring in the 60s, we didn't know how to do it. Nobody had written a book about it. We just had to make it up as we went along. So we'd show up, Cream would show up at sort of baseball stadiums with two guys to do the equipment and one guy to look after the band. When we did the Cream reunion, I think there was 40 people just looking after the band. So that's one difference. It's very much more an industry and a professional thing now. And in a way, I miss the old days when we just we didn't know what we were doing. We were kind of writing the book, as it were, inventing it, making it up as we went along.
Mark Robinson says, your songs, for example, on Harmony Row and Out of the Storm, also perhaps Reach for the Night on Silver Rails, sound composed throughout, not just verse and chorus, but with developing structure. Do you have any comment on that way of composing in popular rather than classical music?
Oh yeah, I think a lot of the kind of composers that I'm interested in popular music do write in that way. People like Frank Zappa or Burt Bacharach, those sort of composers, they don't just write like a song, like a verse and chorus and a middle eight or something. The whole thing is structured, as you say, and certainly Reach for the Night, that's very much structured throughout. I mean, what Derek Warner plays on tenor saxophone, that's his contribution, but the fact that those bars are there with that particular notes in the backing is very much my thing.
Sherry German asks, other than Messiaen and Bach, who are your favourite classical composers?
Oh, I love all of the modern classical composers. But I mean, I love the classical ones too, the real classical ones like Beethoven and Bach, of course. I just like everybody, really. My latest kind of passion at the moment is Prokofiev, that we always think of as a kind of film music writer or something, but some of his piano sonatas and so on are just quite incredible. So I would highly recommend him for a great listen.
That's a good tip. Ian Hall asks, what's the single most important thing for learner bass players to take on board?
To forge your own identity. I think that applies to anybody in any instrument or a singer. You have to be recognizable and you have to stick to that belief in yourself, that your take on music. I mean, what I've tried all my life is to invent my own kind of style, my own kind of music. And I've spent like half a century trying to do that. And I think that's what a serious musician should do. You should really try to make your mark in the music. Not necessarily make a lot of money, although that could be nice, but just forge your own style.
Now we have a question from Space Librarian XL. Good name. Jack, you have played with some great jazz players. Tony Williams and Dick Hexel-Smith come to mind. Could you please discuss how jazz informs not only your playing style, but your writing style as well?
Well, I wouldn't say that jazz really informs my writing style. I would think that's more blues. But certainly jazz, as far as being a bass player, a bass guitar player, that's very much influenced by my jazz background, because I just took my jazz technique on the double bass and applied it to the bass guitar. That's really what I did. I just kind of used a jazz technique in rock music. Certainly that happened. As far as writing is concerned, I think everything I ever heard has influenced me, from the songs my mother used to sing to me when I was very little, the old Scottish folk songs, the Robert Burns songs, which I still love and I still occasionally sing and even perform. There's just so much great material, so many great songs out there, and I think you get touched by everything you hear, everything good.
Norby Udeko would like to know, did you really sing and play Hey Now Princess in one take?
There's a couple of versions of that. I don't believe that I sung it and played it at the same time, no. I think that was an overdubbed vocal. Well, I mean, I think there's two vocals on there, so that would have been hard to do.
He or she would also like to know, will you write the Wheels of Fire Symphony for the London Symphony Orchestra, please?
Okay, if you get me the commission, I'll certainly do it. Yeah, I'd be very happy to do that.
Now we have a question from Alhan Bergman Portela. Hi Jack, you certainly have played with many guitar players in your lifetime. In your opinion, who was the greatest and most exciting guitarist that you have ever played with?
Well, I don't really think of musicians in that competitive kind of way. I'm the greatest, you're better than he is. Or I think all of the guitar players that I've played with have been fabulous, whether they've been famous or not, more famous or not. They've all been pretty famous. I mean, it's so difficult to say. Obviously, Eric Clapton is a fantastic guitar player. Jimmy was a fantastic guitar player. So was John McLaughlin, and the list is just endless, really. Gary Moore, who's also a very close friend and also a fantastic, passionate rock blues player. It would be so difficult to say which one of those was the best or the better. It doesn't really apply.
Yeah. Following on from speaking about Gary Moore, Daniel Abrahamson would like to know, how was it working with Gary in BBM?
Working with Gary was always a great joy. Gary was more insecure than people realized. He had a lot of problems about his stage fright. Was one thing that he suffered from a lot, which a lot of us do, but we get through it. But he found it very difficult sometimes. And I always loved playing with Gary, and he was always very, very encouraging to me. And I miss the guy just as a friend, apart from the playing. I just miss him so much. It's terrible.
Carlos Bill says, hello Jack, I would like to know what scales do you play when you sing and do the fingerstyle at the same time in Smiles and Grins. He's very curious about the tight bass line.
Well, as far as I remember, that's written mostly in C. So it's like C's and F's. It's more or less a blues structure, I think. And yeah, it's all on C with descending vocal line, going from an E down to a C, basically.
Charlie Milky says he's got the live Cream Volume 1 and 2 on heavy rotation, and he'd like to know, what is your approach to improvisation?
First of all, listen to what the other musicians are doing. Don't just barge in and sort of take over. Especially if you're a bass player, it's not really what you are as a bass player is firstly a supportive musician, and a bass player's job, I often jokingly say, is to make the other musicians sound better than they actually are. But there's a lot of truth in that. That's your job. But if it's an improvising band, then the sky's the limit, you know. But it's got to be musical. It can't just be. You can't just steam in and try to play as many notes as possible. Really, that's not right. The main thing is to listen as hard as you can.
Jerome Van Kampen would like to know, my favourite Jack Bruce album is Out of the Storm, with Jim Gordon on 3 songs. What are your memories of playing with him?
Jim Gordon actually saved that album because I was having problems with the original drummer that I had hired to do that in Los Angeles. I won't mention his name, but he wasn't able to play some of the material very well. So then somebody said, oh, get Jim Gordon, he can play anything, because he played with Frank Zappa and all sorts of people. And sure enough, he came in and he was able to play the ones that the other drummer couldn't play. And he saved the album. And then, of course, later on I went on to play with him and co-write with him Apostrophe with Frank Zappa. So yeah, he's a great drummer.
Charlotte Bates says, hi Jack, if you could play alongside any musician, dead or alive, who would you pick?
Wow, that's a tricky one. Who would I like to play along with? I don't know, maybe Mozart if he was
That's a good one.
If he was around, because I think music just really poured out of him. It must have been quite unbelievable just to experience him. It must have been a bit like Charlie Parker or someone like that, who was music, or even the great Larry Young that I played with in Lifetime, the organist. He was another person that I would regard as just being music and not playing music, who was music. And so any of those guys.
Nice. Ezekiel Hubbard asks, how do you visualize music? When you're thinking about music, perhaps conceiving a new riff or melody, what does it look like in your imagination?
I don't think I really visualize music in that way. I think because I have the ability to hear the music in my head, I tend to just listen to it as opposed to visualize it. It's not, for me, music isn't a visual medium. It can lead to images coming in your head later on when the music is realized. But I think my way of writing, I just hear. I write in my head. I don't usually write at a piano or guitar or something, occasionally, but mostly I just write I hear something in my head and then just write it in my head and then write it down on paper, which is visual, but it's also just an aid to remember things.
So you still use manuscript paper to write down your ideas?
Yeah, if it's something that I know I'll forget, because I will. So I tend to write it down as soon as I can.
Ed Ross says, Jack, I thank you for the great gifts you've shared through the years. You are constantly an inspiration for me. Have you ever played or sang on another group's recording under an alias or not credited?
I don't believe I have, actually. I may have done something uncredited, but I don't think I ever used an alias.
Was it true that the first Cream gig was under a different name?
No.
To test it out?
No, the first Cream, I think we used to call it The Cream.
Okay.
But apart from that, no, the first official gig was at Windsor Festival. But in fact, we played the night before that at the Twisted Wheel, was it? Somewhere in Manchester. I think it was the Twisted Wheel. An unannounced secret gig just to try out our material, really. But we never called ourselves anything else.
Randy Ray says, hi Jack, regarding the theme from An Imaginary Western, I've heard it was about Cream on the road and touring. Is there a story to the lyrics other than what the lyrics say? Thanks for all you do.
It was actually written more about the Graham Bond organisation on the road, quite a lot earlier, written in the early 60s by Pete Brown, the great Pete Brown. The music is something I had lying around, written down, lying around in a drawer for years. It started off as a kind of a French-style ballad. And then when Pete gave me those amazing words, I could see that they would fit the music that I had.
Nice.
So I adapted the two together and came up with that. And I think the best version of that song, the one that I like most, is the version on Songs for a Tailor.
Yeah.
I have to say that because as being the composer, you know exactly what you want to say. I quite liked the Mountain version because I liked Felix's vocals, but it didn't quite, for me, get to the essence of the song.
Speaking of poets, Chuck Joe would like to know, are there any poets whose work speaks to you?
When I was starting out composing, when I was still a teenager, I used to set a lot of Dylan Thomas's poems to music, and a couple of those things survive, and they're actually quite in a kind of adolescent way. They're quite nice. Yeah, so certainly he influenced me a lot. Since then, I've been I've been moved by a lot of the First World War poets, Wilfred Owen and Robert Graves and people like that. So yeah, it's kind of mostly older, stuff from that kind of, but people, if they knew the sort of impact that somebody like Dylan Thomas had on the world, really, in the 50s, 40s and 50s, it was quite astounding. So he certainly influenced me, and I did set that to music.
Someone with a great name, Haggis McTavish, would like to know how much fun is it working with Vernon Reid?
I love playing with Vernon. He's the master of many notes. We call him our glorious leader when we're working with Spectrum Road. And that's what he is. He's a glorious leader. And it's always a joy to work with him. He's always on the case with several computers kind of buzzing away at the same time. He's absolutely amazing. What an amazing player. And the first time I worked with him was on a song called Life on Earth, way back in the 80s. And he just came in and did the most incredible guitar solo, just one take, and it was done. It was phenomenal. So yeah, I love him.
Lee Brown would like to know, which song gives you the most pleasure to perform live?
Probably a biggest challenge, and the one that I enjoy most if I get it right is We're Going Wrong, because it's quite a difficult vocal in the sense that there's a certain mood that you have to achieve, and if you don't achieve that, it's not going to happen. So that's one of the ones that I love playing. I love playing all those old songs, but also, of course, if you're a composer, you love to play your new stuff as well.
Yeah.
But I would say, probably We're Going Wrong, and if I get a chance to do I Feel Free, which is quite rarely, I think the last time I really did it regularly was with Ringo Starr's band, because there was enough people in it that we could do all the vocal parts. I enjoyed that a lot.
Nice. Tim Crouch would like to know if you and Robin Trower are still playing together.
Well, of course, on Silver Rails, Robin plays the most amazing guitar on Rusty Lady. So the answer to that is yes.
Yeah, everybody, you need to check out the new album, Silver Rails,
Yes.
if you haven't already. Following on from that, Doug Edwards would like to know if you and Robin would collaborate on a fourth album together.
Oh yeah, if there was time, I would love to do that with Robin. I know he's probably quite busy, but if he comes up with a little time frame, we could we'd love to do that. Yeah, it's always a great pleasure to work with Robin.
Cindy Bacon Gray says, "Hi Jack, I have always loved the song Dance the Night Away, and I believe you wrote it or co-wrote it. I'm wondering how you came up with the psychedelic feel."
I wrote the music for that, and Pete Brown wrote the lyrics. So it's a Bruce Brown song, as are a lot of the Cream songs. That was really inspired by the Byrds, by the 12-string guitar on the Byrds' 8 Miles High. Very much inspired by that, and I thought that was extremely psychedelic at the time, and that just really inspired me to do something. And Eric, of course, came across with this fabulous 12-string guitar playing.
Rupert Zawinski says, "Jack, who was your biggest influence as a singer?"
Biggest influence as a singer. That's a tricky one. Probably my mother, first of all, because she was the one who encouraged me when I was tiny to sing. And then she also took me to have singing lessons, which I think is a lot of the reason why I've hung on to my voice as long as I have. And it's still working, because I did a vocal recording yesterday and it still sounded okay. So that would be the first one, my mom, and then a teacher called Douglas Burney, who was a fabulous guy who was very encouraging to me when I was starting out very young. As far as professional singers, that's difficult. Probably someone like Jussi Björling, who was a great Scandinavian tenor. And then more in the blues field, a lot of blues players, but Bobby Bland, probably, I love very much. Otis Rush, love him. So those are some of the people, yeah.
Shirley Wishart would like to know if Bruce Gary was one of your favourite drummers to play with.
Yeah, he was a great drummer, and he was such a positive guy. That was also the wonderful thing about Bruce. He was really always up for it. He was a fantastic guy and a really good drummer too, yeah. I met him, he came along to a recording session I was doing in the 70s in Los Angeles, and he said, "I'm your drummer, I know all your songs and everything." And I said, okay. Come and see me at my house, I vaguely said, thinking that he would never find it for a start. But he showed up a few months later at the door with his drum kit and he stayed for 4 months. And it was great to get to know him, and we did a lot of really good gigs together. I miss him as well.
Douglas Mike Kirk would like to know, what is your favourite bass guitar that you've played?
Oh, without any doubt, that's my Brazilian cherry wood fretless thumb bass. Although I should be saying, it's the Survivor bass, my own designed one, which is based on this sort of EB3 style bass. It's a lovely, lovely bass, but there's this one that I've had for a number of years now. That's just part of me. That's the thing, a bass guitar or a guitar. I mean, I met Ron Carter a few years ago when we were both, he was actually giving me an award. And he said that he's got this bass that he's had all his career, and he said if something happened to it, he'd probably give up the music business because he'd never find one that he was happy with. I kind of feel the same way with that one.
So is that a Warwick bass?
It's a Warwick, sorry, I didn't mention that. Of course, it's a Warwick fretless
Nice.
Brazilian rosewood thumb bass.
It's a mouthful.
Yes.
Brent Austin would like to know, what strings do you use?
I use SIT strings, that means stay in tune, because they do what they say on the tin. If you give them a good stretch, they won't slip, they won't go out of tune. And they're great.
Now we have a question from Chris Perez. I almost always have a tune in my head. What music is running through your head right now or most recently?
Well, I have a kind of soundtrack going through my bonds all the time. Trying to remember, it can be really silly tunes that somehow get stuck in there, as we all get. It's like a mind virus or something. I can't remember what the latest was. Probably something like Onga Bonga Bonga. I don't want to leave the conga, no, 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 no. So now I've done it to you, you see. You try and get rid of that.
Fred Rudowski would like to know, what was the easiest song to write and record? Conversely, what was the hardest?
Well, the easiest was definitely Life on Earth, which is a song I wrote for one of my solo albums. The one that as I said before, Vernon Reid played on. That was the easiest because I dreamt it. I dreamt the words and the music completely. I didn't have to do anything. I just wrote it down.
Nice.
So it doesn't come much easier than that. The hardest, I don't know. That's hard. There's some songs that are not hard, but you just, like for example, something like, I don't know, some of the ballads that I've written, like over the years, I just like to chip away at them until I think they're perfect as far as the form goes. So it could be any of those little ballads.
John Dreller says, hi Jack, what current bass players interest you? Who's got the mad skills in today's current bands?
Well, I don't really keep up with a lot of the current bands, but I've always really admired Flea because he's such a great player, but he does fantastic backflips at the same time. So that I'm very full of admiration for that. He's one of my favourite players, but I have to admit that I don't sit down and listen to the competition.
So we've got time for a couple more questions.
Good.
Tony Mead says, hi Jack, I hope you're well. Of all the songs you have ever written or co-written, what is your favourite?
I would say my favourite is I Feel Free, because I think I achieved what I was going for, just to write a really good short pop song in the same sense that the Beatles or the Kinks or somebody were writing those amazing little kind of diamonds. And that's what I was trying to do with that particular song. I just wanted it to be absolutely spot on and a proper pop song. And I hit, and it was all of those things. So I think it's probably my favourite.
Nice. So we've got our final question from Carol Hatchett. Hello Jack, what piece of music are you most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of Silver Rails, the new album, because of being able to do it at my age, at that age. It was relatively easy to do. It certainly wasn't the hardest album I've ever done out of all the ones that I've done, but it was just such a joy to work with Rob Cass and all the people at Abbey Road, and also my family were all involved in it, every one of them really, and so the whole project was fantastic. So I'm still very much in love with that one.
That's really nice. Well, I'd like to say thank you to all the fans for submitting your questions. Sorry we couldn't get through all of them, but I'm sure you found this interview very, very interesting, as I have. And thank you, Jack, for taking the time to answer them.
Oh, that's my pleasure. Thanks a lot.